And this game was disappointing for many fans, not only for the fact that it seemed like the Fever had this one in the bag, but they kind of gave it away at the end of the game, but also because it seemed like there was something off with this Fever team. They didn't have the same energy and spark that we all know and love. So many fans are asking, what is going?
Indiana Fever many fans is still poking fingers at head coach Stephanie White for actually making the game not entertaining anymore, bro. This motion offense has to be addressed, and Stephanie White has to be held accountable because it's truly the offense that she's running, and it is not for Caitlin Clark at this point. Now, both Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White spoke to the media immediately after.
Caitlin Clark had pictured her sophomore summer in the W as a blur of trophy, polishing, logo range heat checks, and late-night team dinners where optimism hummed as loudly as the ice machines in the hotel hallways. What she never imagined was a season that felt more like a slow-motion car wreck, where every game ended with new bruises, every film session exposed a deeper system glitch, and every press conference turned into an exercise in public tightrope walking.
Wait, what'd you say? Wait, what? Did you just tell me that Stephanie White went on an interview tour this whole entire offseason saying exactly that? Did you just tell me Stephanie White went on an interview? So how come when Caitlin Clark has a bad game, this team looks like absolute dog shit? How come when Caitlin Clark isn't busy backpacking this team, it looks like absolute dog shit, coach? Just a question. Just a question. What we saw today, folks, I feel bad for everybody that had to sit through that. Everybody that wasted 2 hours and 25 minutes watching the Indiana.
First talk about Caitlin Clark. So she struggled once again in this game. She was 7 for 20 from the field and 1 for 10 from 3, which puts her at 1 for 17 over the past few games. And if you're a fan of Caitlin Clark, you know that this is so unlike her. She is arguably the best shooter in the WNBA, and she is having a significant cold streak over the past 2 games. But her missing shots isn't actually what bothers me. The thing that bothered me most in the game yesterday was the one shot that she passed up. Now, she had been missing a few shots, and if you guys were on my live stream, I said the thing that she needs to do is to continue shooting. Shooters shoot. The only way to break a cold streak is to continue shooting.
By the time Indiana's charter rolled back into Indianapolis after another road loss, this one an 89-81 stumble against the Las Vegas Aces, Clark looked less like the generational force who'd pulled millions of viewers into women's basketball and more like an exhausted grad student defending a dissertation the faculty wanted to fail. Her shoulders sagged beneath an invisible rucksack of turnovers and double teams. Her voice, which used to ping around rooms with caffeine-bright confidence, now carried the rasp of someone who had spent too many nights asking the same question into a ceiling fan. What else can I fix if the walls around me keep tilting? The math said she scored 19 points and dished 10 assists, but the eye test said she spent most of the night outrunning traps, flinching at shoulder bumps that drew no whistle, and staring at teammates who froze when their names flashed across her passing lanes. 8 miscues. 1 for 10 from 3. More lost possessions than she would admit even to her own reflection.
I think I have figured out the solution to the Indiana Fever's problems. Hear me out, hear me out, hear me out. This is what we got to do. We got to put Caitlin Clark off ball. We need to run a motion offense. So when the defense takes away what Caitlin Clark does best, we have other players that can still perform. So when she does have bad games, we're not completely dead in the water. I think that is the best way to move forward with this Indiana Fever team.
That the Indiana Fever were trying to be that team that runs you off the floor, that hustles. I felt like they were the deepest team. Like, looking at the roster, man, they actually have some players that could run the floor. And I'm just like, dang, bro, it's really crazy to see that they're not really trying to run the floor like I would expect them to. And also using Michaela Timpson. Like, that is some young pair of legs, man. You should be using Michaela Timpson to help you run the floor, play lockdown defense, hustle defense, you know, winning the 50-50 balls. You need young legs to do that, man.
Stephanie White, the head coach who had spent the offseason promising a ferocious pace and space reincarnation, met reporters with a half smile so thin it belonged on a caution tape banner. Caitlin's a hard guard, she said, conjuring Taurasi comparisons and officiating riddles. But every compliment landed like an asterisk. Yes, Clark drew contact. Yes, she occasionally initiated it. But the bigger truth, unstated and yet screaming, was that Indiana's offense often looked like a broken carnival ride that jerked and stalled while its most valuable passenger clung to the safety bar. Clark, still in uniform, took the podium minutes later.
Turnovers, which she leads the league in turnovers. She is shooting horrible from the field. And as far as the three-pointers, in the last 2 games, she's only made 1 3-pointer, and that's the one against the Aces.
Thought at times we could have played a little bit faster, and I think that's on me, like not conceding in that. We still got to play up tempo. We still got to play fast. But I mean, I thought for the most part we did a lot of stuff that coach wanted us to do, and that wasn't why we lost.
I can't hold you, man. That kind of looked like she let that slip out, man. I don't know. But I mean, we all see it. When they play slow, it's just not a good team, man. They're not as good as we see that they could be, right? So they need to play fast, man. I think, they don't necessarily look that good when they're playing half-court ball. Maybe taking something from the Valkyries, man. The Valkyries run, all right? They be running.
A single sentence slipped out before she could lasso it. I thought we could have played a little faster, and that's on me. The words seemed harmless, but connoisseurs of subtext felt the seismic ripple. Faster was code for let me cook. Faster was code for quit telling me to bleed the shot clock while help defenders set picnic blankets in front of me. She tried to swallow the frustration with a polite grin, yet everyone heard the muffled thunder. Back in the locker room, a grim tango unfolded. Veterans tugged on compression sleeves, rookies fidgeted with their phones, and no one quite knew how to approach the franchise centerpiece whose stat line glimmered and corroded in equal measure. Clark sat on a folding chair, ice bags sliding off taped knees, replaying the night's worst possessions in her head. The high pick and roll that morphed into a static traffic jam. The corner relocation that left her waving for a pass that never arrived. The blitz 20 feet from the logo that spawned turnover number 8 because the safety valve sprinted a beat late. She could diagnose every symptom. Too much dribble, too little motion, spacing that collapsed like warm taffy, but diagnosis without cure only deepened the ache. Outside the arena, the internet raged. YouTube hosts pounded desks. Twitter threads braided into ropes of indignation.
The league needs to take care of Caitlin, not for special treatment purposes, but that's who everybody's there to see. Everybody wants to see Caitlin Clark play. And if you let other teams and other people beat the shit out of her, she's going to spend 2 weeks out injured. And your attendance is going to drop because people aren't going to get the chance to see her. And if you actually want to be paid the same as the NBA players, obviously not by actual dollar for dollar, but for revenue percentage, you need to protect her. You need her to be playing at her best and not be having the shit.
Well, I think you have to look at things a little bit holistically. I think Caitlin Clark is a really hard player to officiate, much like Diana Taurasi was throughout the course of her career, for a couple of reasons. Caitlin Clark regularly gets picked up in the full court. She also gets blitzed more over the course of her career than any player in WNBA history or in that period of time. And she also creates some contact herself on the offensive end of the floor. She is very difficult to officiate because of all of the contact that's happening around her.
Stephanie White is shackling Caitlin Clark, some cried. Others demanded wholesale roster surgery. New shooters, new screens, new lungs that could run Clark's preferred tempo for 40 minutes. Everywhere the same refrain. Free the star before she fades. Attendances spiked whenever Clark was healthy. They cratered the moment she sat with hip soreness. Ratings followed the same graph. Advertisers whispered about deliverables and exposure. League officials issued press releases about points of emphasis, yet somehow the nightly soundtrack remained a chorus of uncalled hacks and subtle elbows. It wasn't just the missed whistles. It was the emotional erosion. Each drive to the rim became a physics experiment. Would she absorb a forearm across the ribs or a hip check disguised as help side rotation? Each screen felt like a blind date with whiplash. Some nights, she begged the refs with her eyes. Other nights, she chose silence, fearing that visible frustration would earn her the rookie entitlement label everyone seemed eager to superglue to her jersey. Meanwhile, White's chalkboard turned into an abstract mural of half-erased arrows. In theory, Indiana wanted to run 5 out, rim running, 33 per game threes. In reality, possessions devolved into knotty patterns no one could untangle at game speed. One trip down the floor, they'd fly. The next, they'd chug. One quarter, Clark would dominate the rock. The next, she'd watch from the weak side corner while 3 teammates played hot potato. The constant shifting felt less like tactical versatility and more like philosophical whiplash. The physical toll mounted. Blue bruises across her shooting arm, a welt on the left hip from an incidental screen, ankle tweaks, and a nagging rib bruise no reporter had fully coaxed into the daylight.
The game deserves better.
Well, I be damned. I be damned. 7 for 20 from the field, 1 for 10 from the three-point line. And look at those turnovers, 8 turnovers. She leads the league in turnovers. But guess what? Her Clarkies are only going to be impressed, and they're going to brag about the 19 points and 10 assists. Me personally, I'm all about efficiency. I'm concerned about those last 3.
In quieter moments, she wondered how long adrenaline alone could keep the engine roaring. She iced, she stretched, she studied film until red-eyed dawn, then dragged her body into another 3 games in 5 nights gauntlet. When Indiana returned home, Clark beat the trainers to the practice gym, launching jumper after jumper beneath pale lights. Swish, swish, clink, swish. The ball snapped through the net in perfect isolation. 10 empty, echoing minutes later, White entered, leaning against the doorway. For a breath, they existed in uneasy stillness. Coach and star, system and symptom. "We have to let you loose," White murmured, almost inaudible above the squeak of rubber. Whether it was declaration or self-reassurance remained uncertain. Across the league, rival players sniffed blood. Some came swinging, seeing cachet in humbling the league's billboard. Marina Mabry checked her so hard at half court that even NBA commentators gasped. Angel Reese chirped on social media about hype. Anonymous vets grumbled that the kid had skipped the cue. Clark answered with fourth-quarter flurries, logo threes, and an ever-thickening skin. But each retaliatory performance drew harsher retaliation the next night. And then there were the referees. Some believed they simply missed calls in the heat of warp speed possessions. Others insisted quieter motives, keep the rookie humble, maintain pecking order. Whatever the reason, the patterns grew absurd. Drives where her arm was pinned, but the whistle stayed silent. Off-ball wrestling that produced no fouls until she jerked free with visible frustration, whereupon she earned the personal. Analysts replayed sequences frame by frame on broadcast, drawing circles in telestrator neon around the contact. League headquarters shrugged, promised review, kept the caravan moving. Through it all, Clark did not lash out. She spoke in tempered syllables about learning curves, about patience, about embracing leadership. Even when fatigue crept into her vowels, she shielded teammates from blame. "We aren't consistent yet," she said. "We have to commit to who we want to be." The implied plea, "Please choose who we want to be," lingered unspoken. The next road trip delivered fresh circus acts, a 7-4-20 shooting night punctuated by that single, haunting statistic, 1 for 10 from 3. Cold streaks happened to every sniper, but this one felt like a symptom of deeper malaise. Shot number 6 rimmed out. Shot number 7 came up short. By shot number 8, she registered a flicker of hesitation foreign to her DNA. On possession 13, she passed out of a wide-open pull-up, and color commentators exhaled honest shock. That was the moment every fan felt the tremor. Clark wasn't simply missing. Uncertainty had curled its fingers around her trigger. Internet loudhailers pounced. Some corpse-picked the stat sheet, 8 turnovers, tying the league lead. Others hammered efficiency. A few, cloaked as allies, wagged fingers about rookie humility, ignoring that Clark's shooting kept the fever within single digits most nights despite schematic chaos. A vocal subset shouted at White, Why in the name of Naismith are you parking the best passer in the league in a corner while 4 non-shooters run a Princeton remix they clearly don't understand?
There's no player that's going to be that depressed about a loss. The emotion that she's having right now, that's emotion that you have when you lose a championship. But they didn't lose a championship. So it's only one other thing. I knew something was up, y'all. I played basketball all my life. I played point guard. It was something off about Miss Caitlin when I was watching that Aces game. And I couldn't put my finger on it. It just seemed like Miss Caitlin, she was definitely unmotivated. She looked defeated the whole game. She didn't look like she was having fun. And that is always because of the coach. Always. Any professional athlete or any ball player is not having fun on the field because this is the game they love. They've been loving this since they was a kid. Because the only reason the player is not having a good time playing the game that they love is because the coach is trying to put shackles on them. Trying to control them too much. With a player like Caitlin, you gotta let them loose. This is something that Steve Kerr had to realize when he was dealing with Steph. Steph was shooting all the logo threes. He was shooting all the shots early in the shot clock. Steve Kerr would shake his head. He'd be like, oh, what are you doing? But after a while, he had to let this player do his thing. Dude, that was the first time I ever seen Caitlin Clark walk the ball down the court. You know what? I don't think Stephanie White is like a fan of Caitlin's demon time and, you know, her getting all riled up and pumping up the crowd. I don't think she's a fan of that shit. Some coaches, like, they don't like that shit. For example, when Allen Iverson came into the league, him and Larry Brown did not get along because Larry Brown used to tell him to tone it down and not be himself and stuff like that. I think that's what's going on with this team right now. Because when I was watching that game, man, it just did not feel right. Like, she just looked like she was just so sad about playing. It felt like she was being forced to play a certain type of way.
The noise crescendoed when ex-coach Gino Orima lobbed a roadside grenade, implying Clark's pouty body language undercut her teammates. It wasn't critique, it was drive-by shade, and it stung precisely because it came from someone whose approval once felt like basketball knighthood. Clark, asked to respond, pursed her lips and said only, Coach Gino's entitled to his opinion. But her eyes had already answered. ET2? And still the league let the mauling continue. In Chicago, she ate an inadvertent elbow that split her lip. In Connecticut, a blindside screen left her kneeling, breathless, counting ribs. Each time she peeled off the floor, chest heaving, and kept playing. Grit, they called it. Others called it negligence. The money machine word on. Tickets resold at NBA prices. TV partners flexed record ratings. Social media engagement soared whenever Clark lifted from 32 feet or when some veteran tried to turn her torso into an elbow rest. The league's marketing department used both highlight and lowlight in equal measure, feeding fans a cocktail of jaw-dropping range and gladiatorial peril. But numbers cannot disguise erosion forever. Fans who had tuned in for magic began noticing the bruises, the frustrated shrugs toward the bench, the sluggish half-court sets that left Clark standing like a lighthouse no one visited. Message boards shifted tone, from she'll figure it out to they're wasting her. A whispered question trickled onto talk shows. How long before she asks out? Behind closed doors, Clark's agent fielded European inquiries. Turkish powerhouses dangled 7-figure tax-free deals. One billionaire owner allegedly suggested funding an entirely new North American league if Clark ever chose to walk away. They were contingency plans, nothing more. Yet each plan represented a door the WNBA appeared eager to leave unlocked by refusing to address the circus. Meanwhile, Indiana's locker room sagged. Veteran forward Nalissa Smith, usually sunshine, slammed her fist against a locker after a 20-point lead dissolved into an overtime loss. We can't run a mile, and then crawl the last 5 feet, she barked. Matheny Prince nodded silently, eyeing the stat sheet, where Clark's plus-minus glowed red. Even the rookies sensed fracture lines. On a rare off day, Clark slipped into a local middle school gym for a kids' clinic. 10-year-old squealed. Parents snapped photos. She smiled through the fatigue and drained 50 consecutive threes for the crowd. For 90 minutes, she looked like the Iowa superhero again. No hacks, no lost screens, just ball and net and joy. She remembered that feeling like oxygen. It reminded her what playing free once meant. That night she sat in her apartment, ice packs velcroed to shins, and wrote 3 sentences in her journal. I can lead. I can survive. But can I thrive here? The season slogged on. Another back-to-back, another 8-turnover speed bump, another press conference where White talked about holistic progress, while Clark's eyes mapped escape routes only she could see. National analysts called it a learning curve. But the shape of the curve looked less like an upward arc and more like a looping roller coaster that kept returning to the same drop. At some point, the league will face a reckoning. It can elevate its brightest light, build an offense that amplifies her, enforce rules that protect her, celebrate teammates who compliment her. Or it can pretend the nightly gauntlet is normal, squeeze every last rating point from her brand, and then act shocked when the goose grabs her suitcase and boards an overseas flight where the rules are consistent, the hits are policed, and the coaching staff hands her the keys without hesitation. Because Caitlin Clark is still a comet, still incandescent, but even comets burn out if they're asked to light a sky that refuses to hold them. And somewhere deep in the rafters of Gainbridge Fieldhouse, the bulbs keep flickering, daring anyone, to fix the wiring before the arena goes dark and the only thing left is the memory of how bright it used to be.